I want you to imagine, just for a second, a world where you wake up tomorrow morning,
Okay.
you step outside, and the entire global bureaucracy has just completely vanished.
Just gone overnight.
Exactly. Gone. Every sprawling government agency, every border checkpoint, every single political party, and believe it or not, even traditional family units are just, completely wiped out.
Wow. That is a heavy premise.
Yeah, it really is. And in their place, you have this perfectly harmonized, frictionless society. But here's the real kicker. The whole thing is run by a grand total of just 103,000 individuals.
And a whole lot of artificial intelligence, right?
Yes, aided by this massive fleet of AI. It sounds like the premise of a massive sci-fi epic. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are looking at a highly detailed, incredibly futuristic utopian text. It's written by an author named Feng. And this piece, which was published on February 23rd, 2024, has a title that just immediately grabs you. It's called 3,000 Selfless Warriors Galloping, 100,000 Genuine Academicians Shaping the Wind.
It is a remarkable title for what is really a deeply complex thought experiment.
Well, absolutely.
But before we begin dissecting the architecture of this proposed future, which the author calls the era of life genuine, I want to set the stage for you, the listener.
Yeah, we need some ground rules here.
Right. Our mission today is to impartially explore this text as a fascinating blueprint. We are looking at it purely as a philosophical exercise, regarding how human society could theoretically operate at an extreme end of the spectrum.
Exactly. Just to be totally clear, we are not here to endorse the political, social, or spiritual viewpoints presented in the text.
No, not at all. Our role is just to unpack the provocative ideas, the underlying mechanisms, and, well, the logic of the world Shui has envisioned.
We are essentially acting as your tour guides through a very radical, very specific vision of tomorrow. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the grand utopian promise of this text, we actually have to start with the sheer scale of the problem the author is trying to solve.
And it is a massive problem.
Right. He builds his case by forcing us to look at modern human management, and the baseline numbers he uses are just staggering.
They really are. The author points out that our current global society requires an astronomical expenditure of human capital just to maintain the status quo.
Just to keep the lights on, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Think about the historical context of bureaucracy. As societies moved from, agrarian communities to these complex, interconnected global economies, the administrative overhead just skyrocketed.
Oh, for sure.
We had to invent vast systems to manage resources, enforce laws, process disputes, all of that.
And the text pulls data to prove this point, specifically from 8 major countries. Just in the U.S., we're looking at 24.03 million civil servants.
That is a staggering number of people managing other people.
Right. And China is at 7.167 million. France has 5.05 million. Japan is at 4.48 million.
It just keeps going.
It really does.
Yeah.
Germany has 1.8 million. South Korea has 1 million. Russia is sitting at 685,300. And the UK has 460,000.
Wow.
If you just add up those 8 countries, that is nearly 44.7 million people living on the public purse.
And that's just 8 countries. Globally, across 197 countries, the author estimates there are over 200 million civil servants.
200 million.
Yeah. We're talking about millions of people whose entire existence is funded by the public purse, basically, just to manage the rest of us.
They are the ones processing passports, auditing taxes, enforcing zoning laws, just running the entire machinery of the state.
And that administrative bloat is really the foundation of the author's critique. Over 200 million people worldwide dedicated solely to governance and management. The author looks at this and sees a monumental, unsustainable waste of human potential.
Which leads us to the most radical proposition of the text. The author proposes that in this new era of life genuine, all of mankind like, the entire globe will be managed by exactly 103,000 individuals.
It's a bold claim.
Bold is an understatement. They intend to replace over 200 million people with 103,000. I have to push back on the sheer mechanics of that.
That's a natural reaction.
Imagine taking a bloated, massive global corporation that has millions of middle managers, regional directors, administrative assistants, and you suddenly fire absolutely everyone except a tiny, specialized startup team of 103,000 people.
Right.
Like, how does society not immediately collapse into absolute uncontrollable chaos?
Well, the author actually anticipates that exact reaction. He asks directly in the text if this is a pipe dream, acknowledging how impossible it sounds to our modern ears.
Yeah, because it does sound impossible.
Sure. But the survival of this incredibly lean management structure relies on a two-prong mechanism. The first prong is technological, specifically the deployment of what he calls artificial intelligence biological robots.
Now, when he says biological robots, we aren't just talking about a software program autofilling your tax returns, right?
Far from it. The text implies this synthesis of computational processing power and physical organic presence.
Okay.
These AI entities are meant to physically navigate human spaces and completely replace the administrative and logistical work of those 200 million civil servants.
So they are doing the actual heavy lifting of bureaucracy.
Exactly. The author claims that a single artificial intelligence biological robot will be able to handle the workload of tens of thousands of current human workers. The tedious, bureaucratic friction of society is entirely offloaded to an automated system that, doesn't sleep, doesn't take bribes, and doesn't require a pension.
Okay, sure. A machine might be able to calculate global resource distribution or handle the paperwork. But it cannot stop a human being from getting jealous or greedy or violent.
Right.
If you just take our current society and replace the government with highly efficient AI, you still have people fighting over resources. You can't just code human nature out of existence.
Well, unless you fundamentally change human nature itself, which
Yeah.
is the second prong of the author's solution. He introduces the concept of the baptized soul garden.
And just to clarify for the listener, when Euphanila's baptized soul, he isn't talking about water and a religious ceremony.
Bro.
He is talking about a complete rewiring of human desires. It reads like he is essentially proposing we delete the ego's operating system entirely.
That's a great way to put it.
The author states that in this future era, people have their soul gardens baptized from youth, meaning their spiritual and mental states are fundamentally upgraded. They are so advanced and clear in their purpose that they intuitively know how to act without any supervision.
What's fascinating here is how the author completely reframes the concept of social order.
How so?
Well, in our current reality, we manage societal disorder through external forces. We use police, laws, courts, regulations, and the threat of punishment to keep people in line.
Right, the stick, basically.
Exactly. But the author solves the problem of crime and disorder by theorizing an internal upgrade. If the internal state, the soul garden, is perfectly harmonized and unselfish, the need for external management just evaporates.
Wow. Okay, so if human nature is upgraded to this state of perfect, unselfish harmony, and the AI biological robots are handling all the logistics, the bedrock institutions of our current world suddenly have no purpose.
They become completely obsolete.
And the text is brutal about what gets torn down. The casualties are sweeping. In this era of life genuine, there are no countries, no political parties, no religions.
It's a clean slate.
But the one that genuinely stopped me in my tracks was the explicit removal of marriage and the traditional family unit.
Yeah, that is usually the one that catches people off guard. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying logic of the text makes the erasure of these institutions entirely consistent.
You mean regarding the selflessness aspect?
Exactly. Consider what a country, a political party, or even a traditional family structure actually is from a sociological perspective.
Okay.
They are primarily mechanisms for resource guarding. They are boundaries we draw to define us versus them.
Right. A country uses borders and militaries to protect its resources from outsiders.
And a family pools its finances, its time, and its energy to protect and elevate its own members. And that is inherently at the expense of others outside that unit.
It's the ultimate exclusionary bond, like I prioritize my child over your child.
Exactly. But the author's vision relies on the premise of pure selflessness. If humanity reaches a state where every individual is entirely unselfish, then borders, tribal affiliations, and even the exclusionary bonds of marriage lose their function.
Because there's no us and them anymore.
Right. It's like moving from a privately walled garden where you only water your own plants and you lock the gate at night to a massive global forest where the concept of a fence doesn't even make sense to the ecosystem anymore. Pure selflessness renders the need to protect what's mine from what's yours completely obsolete.
That is just, I really want you, the listener, to pause for a second and just try to imagine that reality.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
Imagine waking up in a world entirely devoid of your nationality. You have no political tribe to cling to. You don't even have a traditional family structure defining your immediate circle or telling you who you belong to.
It's radical.
The text describes this as an absolute paradise, but try to imagine how that level of ultimate, untethered freedom would actually feel. To be completely unanchored from every single identity marker we currently use to define ourselves.
It would require a profound psychological shift. I mean, a human being stripped of those tribal identifiers would experience intense existential vertigo.
Yeah, I'd probably have a panic attack.
Right. Which is why the author insists that the spiritual state of these future humans must be heavily conditioned from a young age just to handle that lack of boundaries.
Okay, so with all those traditional governments and familiar institutions gone, we are looking at a massive power vacuum.
True.
Someone still has to direct the AI and set the course for humanity. Who exactly steps into this vacuum to run the world?
Well, the author provides a very specific division of labor for the 103,000 individuals who take the reins.
Yeah, the text breaks their titles down clearly. First, you have the 3,000. These are the selfless warriors, and they are described as management-level Chanuan celestials.
Right, they handle the physical realm.
Exactly. Their job is managing the construction of material wealth. They are the ones directing the physical operations of the globe. Then you have the 100,000. These are the academicians or soul-level Chanuan celestials.
And their role is a bit more abstract.
Yeah, their purpose is shaping the wind. They create the spiritual wealth for mankind and are responsible for baptizing the soul gardens of the general population.
The way the author views these 103,000 individuals is vital to understanding the text. He explicitly elevates them well beyond ordinary humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
The text claims their non-material structure of life has long been alienated. They have transcended basic human drives and operate on a cosmic level.
He literally refers to them as angels, bodhisattvas, celestials, Buddhas, and even a small number of gods.
Because of this profound alienation from typical selfish human desires, they are promised an ultimate cosmic destination.
A reward for their service.
Right. The text states they are destined for the Elysium Celestial Islands continent, and a select few will even reach something called the Supreme Authentic Wisdom continent.
So what does this all mean? I have to stop you there, because this raises a massive red flag for me.
Go ahead.
If you are listening to this right now, you are probably thinking the exact same thing. This sounds terrifyingly like an absolute dictatorship dressed up in spiritual clothing.
I can see why you'd say that.
The author insists these individuals are perfectly unselfish, but we are still talking about a society where the entire globe is guided by a tiny, spiritually superior upper class of 103,000 beings who are described as literal gods.
Well, everyone else is managed by algorithms.
Exactly. The rest of humanity is managed by AI and spiritual conditioning. Relying on an alienated vanguard to rule humanity requires an incredible leap of faith.
That is a highly valid critique of the power dynamics at play here. The concentration of influence is absolute, even if it is categorized as spiritual guidance rather than, political authority.
It's still power.
It is. The author, however, attempts to dismantle this skepticism by arguing that this state of pure selflessness is not some arbitrary title granted to a ruling class by birthright or force. He argues that it is a tangible, mechanical process of the mind.
Right. He breaks down the mechanics of selflessness into a specific formula.
Yes, he does.
The text states that to live this selfless and egoless life, your brain must be very clear. He is super blunt about it. Individuals who are confused simply cannot achieve this state.
They don't make the cut.
Exactly. And he frames it as a massive net positive for the individual, claiming that the happiest people in mankind are the unselfish ones, and those with the brightest prospects are the selfless and egoless ones.
This raises an important question regarding human cognitive development and neuroplasticity.
How so?
Well, the author isn't merely suggesting that people try harder to be good. He provides a strict biological and temporal timeline for this transformation. He warns that if someone wants to become one of these 3,000 warriors or 100,000 academicians, they must begin the process during adolescence.
Because he points to the way the human brain solidifies as we age.
Exactly. We know from modern cognitive science that the brain prunes synaptic connections as we mature. It makes our habits and worldviews increasingly rigid.
It's set in our ways.
Right. The text aligns with this, noting that by the time we reach middle or old age, our thinking is essentially locked in. Our values, our survival instincts, our understanding of mine versus yours, they become neurologically entrenched.
So you can't just flip a switch when you're 40.
No, the author believes the shift required to reach pure selflessness is so subversive and so fundamentally opposed to our evolutionary survival instincts that you simply cannot rewrite the programming of an older brain. The spiritual alienation must begin when the mind is still pliable.
Hearing all of this, it sounds like a prophecy meant for a civilization, like 1,000 years in the future.
It does feel very distant.
But the author drops a massive bombshell toward the end of the text. He claims this isn't just a distant theoretical dream. He states that a group already exists today that has successfully birthed dozens of these selfless and egoless individuals.
Wait, today?
Yes, he says they are currently walking among us right now, and they are the active vanguard who will lead mankind into this new era of life genuine.
Wow. That drastically shifts the tone of the text from a utopian manifesto into an active, present-day mission statement.
Completely changes the stakes.
It really does. The author is planting a flag in the ground, declaring that the transition has already begun, anchored by these dozens of individuals currently operating in the world.
It is a phenomenal amount of material to process. To bring it all together, Chauvin's vision of the era of life genuine is a complete structural reimagining of the human experience.
That's a good summary.
It is the promise of a paradise on earth, defined by ultimate freedom and the absolute removal of every societal burden we carry today. No taxes, no borders, no bureaucratic friction at all.
Just a perfectly harmonized global existence.
It's exactly. Supported by advanced AI biological robots and guided by a deeply enlightened, thoroughly conditioned vanguard of 103,000 selfless souls.
It is a sweeping architecture for a post-scarcity, post-ego tomorrow. As we wrap up this exploration, I want to reiterate our framework for today.
Always important.
We served as your analytical guides through this primary source, mapping out the mathematics of the bureaucracy, the proposed utility of artificial intelligence, and the sociological implications of erasing institutions like the family unit. And we're doing so without taking a stance on the spiritual validity of the author's ultimate claims.
We just opened up the blueprints and look at how the gears of this proposed paradise are supposed to turn.
Exactly. But exploring these blueprints does leave us with a profound question about our own reality, one that echoes beyond the text itself.
Let's hear it.
The author imagines a world where all administrative burdens and societal frictions are removed by AI, theoretically allowing humanity to ascend to a state of spiritual harmony. But I want you to consider this. If an AI biological robot could genuinely take over all the tedious, frustrating burdens of survival tomorrow, would human beings naturally default to a state of blissful, unselfish peace?
That's the million-dollar question.
Or is it possible that the friction, the daily struggles, the debates, and the messy, complicated, fiercely protective bonds of the traditional family and local community are exactly what give the human experience its meaning?
Wow. That is definitely something to chew on as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this intellectual journey, and we will catch you until our next deep dive.